During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in the vast river, never meaning anything in one location long. We settled in Rose Island when I was 8, and never remained there until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there were some fragments of the attic in my brain, which belonged to various homes that we lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is one set of memories which remains clear as glass, as though they were just made yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply just lucid dreams produced by the long sickness as I experienced that spring, but in my heart, I know that they're real. We were living in a house just outside of the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine. Population was around 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the first 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space. But there was only the house on the market at the time, and with at least an hour's communicate to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said that I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was a horrible timing to be bedridden, as they were the process of packing our stuff to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me a ginger ale and some books several times a day, and these were served as a function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always just loomed around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound to my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with my mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth, because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large comparison to his body, his head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was far the largest. "You look fine, kind of like a Furby," I said. I flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know the toy, the little robot with big ears that you could just pet and feed it? Almost like a real pet?" "Oh!" Mr. Widemouth reassumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. Those aren't really the same as having a real friend." I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check on me. "I lay under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by my stories and pictures that they contained. The 3rd or 4th month after meeting him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we could play," he said. "We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you, because she can't see us play. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda as the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped from under the bed and tugged on my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was the window on the opposite doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open, then beckoned to me to look out to the ground below. We were on the 2nd story of my house, and it was on a hill, and from this angle was a drop farther than 2 stories due to the incline. "I used to play pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I played pretend up here that it was big, soft trampoline below this window, and if I jump, if you pretend hard enough, you'll bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try." I was a 5-year-old with a fever, and it was only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. Now if it were the way you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with that idea, picturing myself falling through the thin air, only to bounce back up to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realists have prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. "I don't know if I'll have enough imagination. I could get hurt." So Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of his day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived, holding a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "There are some things you can practice before I start giving you lessons." I looked in the box, and it was full of knives. "My parents would kill me," I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth fought and brought knives into my room, objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. "I'll be spanked and grounded for a year." Mr. Widemouth frowned. "It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it." I pushed the box away. "I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives are not safe just to throw in the air." Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid them under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth even often woke me up at night, saying to put a real trampoline under the window, a big one, so that I couldn't see it in the dark. I always declined, but I tried to go back to sleep. But Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he would stay by my side until early in the morning, encouraged me to jump. He wasn't so much fun to play with anymore. My mother came in to me one morning and told me that I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confronted to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning for the feeling of the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look, because then he said, "It's safe, I promise." I followed him at the beginning of the deer trail, which ran through the woods behind the house. "This is an important path," he explained. "I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day, I hope to take you there." I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place would be beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, last load of our things had been packed into the moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit. Despite of what he said otherwise, for this reason, I decided to keep the departure a secret. My father and I were at the truck at 4 a.m., and he was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow, with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a 6-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon, rather than the one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "Early enough for you," my father said. He asked with a hint of sympathy. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's been hard for you, as sick as you ever been. Once Daddy gets his promise and settled down, then you can make friends." I opened my eyes, and as we backed out of the driveway, I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood there motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye with a steak knife in hand, and I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land was now of a house stood upon the empty exact for the foundation. The house was burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me. But I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that was no longer existed. I exit out of the new vineyard to the memorial cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children. And that, my little pretties, was Mr. Widemouth, a creepypasta written by Perfectcircle35. My final thoughts on this story? Pretty good pasta, actually. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I actually heard of this narration of this story for the first time from, well, Mr. Creepypasta, and I also heard other people narrate this story, such as Creeps with Pasta, Creepypasta Jr. And I mean, it's a really well made story. I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty good story for what this is. So it's basically, a young child meets this little creature who is also known as, well, who is Mr. Widemouth. So basically, he ends up becoming friends with this protagonist. And yeah, I mean, it's a good story. I'm not going to deny that one bit. I think it's also a really great story. It was definitely well made for what this one is. I mean, it's pretty neat and all. I mean, it's pretty crazy that he pretends to be a friend to the protagonist, but it's most likely he's also doing this to trick the protagonist so he can get he can get what he wants, is to kill the protagonist. I mean, it's messed up. I'm not going to deny that one bit. It is messed up with the concept of its own self, but I actually really found this pasta to be enjoyable. Like, it's a pretty good pasta. I really like the concept of the story of how it went out. I like this story, such as, well, the good grammar, the sentence structuring, the storyline. Everything about it was just went out very amazingly. Like, I mean, I'm gonna sit here and say that this is actually a pretty good story for what this one is. Like, I mean, I could definitely say, for those of you guys who want to see a good story, I recommend you check out this story. This is on the regular Creepypasta Wiki. And I mean, I recommend Creepypasta narrators. Like, if you want to narrate a Creepypasta, you should really go over here and see that this story is, well, fantastic. I mean, the fact of what the creature looked like, it sounded terrifying by, the description of it. Like, basically how the protagonist, described how what Mr. Widemouth looked like. I mean, it's pretty gruesome at times. I'm not going to deny it, but it actually was pretty good for how the concept really was. I mean, yeah, I've seen, other pastas that actually do this too. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. When I first saw this story, I honestly realized how pretty good this one was well written. Like, I mean, the author, managed to incorporate good amounts of, well, what the sentence structuring reign of this story. Now, mainly the sentence structuring was perfect, as well as the good grammar. The storyline was fantastic, and I love the concept of what Mr. Widemouth looked like. I mean, yeah, there's people, who did drawings of what he would look like, as well as some Google images. I mean, I've seen them, and I mean, I think they're most likely photoshopped, but if this guy was actually real, I could picture him being, very freaky and creepy looking. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I've seen, other creepypastas that managed to do this too. But I could definitely say it's a pretty good one. So, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't read this story in like a while, and this is my first time reading it in like a while. Well, I read it a few times the other day. So I have to say, it's a good creepypasta, actually. Now, I'm gonna definitely say now that this one it's a beautiful, well-made story. Definitely a worth to look at. And I'm gonna tell you right now, guys, you will not be disappointed once you read this story. You would love this story. It's fantastic. It's amazing. You will not be disappointed once you've seen this one. So, with that being the case, that being said, I'm gonna sit here and wrap up the review. Like I'm gonna say, This is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 10 out of 10. It's a beautiful, well-made creepypasta. There's definitely time and effort into it, and I definitely really do like how the concept really was, and I do like how beautiful, well written that the story is, as well as the good grammar. I really do like it. I found it to be really amazing. It's definitely worth to check out, and I recommend you guys go watch this. Go watch other narrations of this story too, because if you have, then I recommend you guys go check out this story, and if you want to give it a read, I recommend it. Go ahead and give it a read. You will not be disappointed, as you would love how beautiful, well made the story is. And it's a good classic creepypasta to enjoy. Now, anyways, with that being said, what did you guys personally think of this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode, and if you're brand new here to this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.